Good afternoon. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I have with me a good friend, Henry Pietras, who we've been talking with over the past 6 or 7 months about the Democratic Party specifically and presidential politics in general. On last night's show, we were talking about the Democratic Party platform and how we've managed to leverage some of our things we were in favor of into the party platform based on our 45%, little over 45%, but around 45% of pledged delegates for the candidate that we supported. And I think people will acknowledge, looking backwards, if we had known then that we'd get 45% of the pledged delegates, we would have been pretty happy. I mean, that's a very sizable number of pledged delegates in a candidacy where you have you're going up against a very powerful family, a very powerful set of influential folks behind her, and here we are. So we've got our 45%. You mentioned some of the things, and go back to talk a little bit more about Joseph Stiglitz, because we have Henry has a book with him that's by Joseph Stiglitz about it's called The Great Divide, and I'll let him explain a little bit more about that.
Well, the basic premise is the inequality. It's called The Great Divide, and Stiglitz is a Nobel laureate in economics. He's taught at just about every university that's of the highest rated universities here in the countries, including MIT, Harvard, Columbia, and a few, and Princeton as well. So he's been on the Council of Economic Advisors. He was the chair, succeeded by Janet Yellen, and interestingly, Janet Yellen was his former student, and he says she was his best student. And he highly recommended her as a replacement for Bernanke when there was a competition between Bernanke and Yellen. He recommended her over. Over Larry Summers was the alternate, and he said that Summers basically had no clue, and he was the cause of a lot of the issues that we've had. So he preferred Yellen over Summers.
Okay, I'm going to give you the condensed version of the book, and then Henry can go into detail. The condensed version is, if the wealthy in America want to get wealthier and stay wealthy, they will make sure that workers are well paid. Because if workers are well paid, then they can be consumers. They can buy the products that the wealthy produce. They can buy the services that the wealthy produce. And when they buy the services and the goods that the wealthy produce using the toil and work and the hard efforts of American workers, then those wealthy people become wealthier. So it's going to happen that way. We were talking off camera with our producer Roberto in between shows, and talking about how consumer spending is looking very bleak nowadays. And when consumer spending is bleak, the wealthy are going to suffer. Because the working folks in America, they've already done their suffering. They're in the process of suffering and not being able to buy goods and services. That comes back around to haunt the folks that if they had paid workers a fair wage, a wage that they could use in order to buy goods and services, then the whole thing runs circle. The money travels. In capitalism, you want the money to travel as quickly as possible. You want it to go from employer to employee to buying things from the employer. And it travels in circles, and the faster money travels, the healthier an economy you have. When people hoard their money and invest their money rather than spend their money to improve factories, improve goods, improve our roads, improve our infrastructure, then people can get to work better and easier. They can work harder and longer. They don't have to be so concerned about getting to work. and everything runs smoother. Continue with the specifics.
Well, David, you read the book.
Well, yeah. Well, I've been breathing this stuff for at least 6 years on the show, but yeah, to delve us into the specifics and talk a little bit more about Janet Yellen and why was she a better person for the job than Larry Summers?
Well, because his basic case was that because she made predictions, her predictions about the future of how the economy was going to roll out were accurate, whereas Summers was not. Okay, and he cites many examples in one of the chapters about what she actually did compared to Summers. If you're asking me to the details, I say let's read the book.
Read the book. Okay, that's good. Joseph Stiglitz, The Great Divide. It's a good, commonsensical read if you want to understand how things work best in a capitalist system.
And the basic premise is share the wealth.
Yeah, small market capitalism is a great thing, as long as the folks that can earn enough money to spend it.
Yep. And the money that is generated is to be put back into generating more jobs and products, as opposed to hoarding it or offshoring it somewhere.
I think we talked off camera briefly about the notion of back in the 20s and 30s, Henry Ford understood, very simple premise, he understood that in order for his company to sell a lot of Fords, he needed to pay his workers enough money so they could afford to buy the car that they were making. Now that went out of focus in the 70s when the Japanese introduced a lot of very good cars, and American car makers really kind of lost their way as far as making a good product, and it got to the point where Americans were going to work for Ford Motor Company and leaving work and going and buying a Toyota, or in that case, in those days, Nissan or the other cars that were made by Ford's competitors, and that just took us down. It ruined our auto industry almost. Thankfully, it's come back. Particularly Ford has come back fairly strongly. And things are looking good with that, but we know that it needs to happen everywhere in American society. Not only goods, not only the things that we buy, but services. Goods and the clothes that we buy need to be made. Where do they need to be made, Henry?
Here, I hope.
Yeah, they need to be made in America.
Unfortunately, as Bernie was talking about in his campaign, about 60,000 manufacturing factories
Not just
have left this nation. And to bring that back would take a huge investment. So rather than bringing that back, I think we need to move in a different direction. So new technologies, new opportunities. Clean energy is a huge opportunity, and I would hope that the party of business realizes it and takes advantage of it. The reality is that a lot of the clean energy industry is taking off with government support, but also without government support. It's going on anyway. If you look around around this area, there are many installations, both hot water as well as solar, that people are going ahead and doing despite the subsidies, which are disappearing, of course. And they're just doing it mainly for the savings, but also for the good that it does for our planet.
Back at the turn of the last century, 1899 into 1900, and beyond that, America made a transition from coal to oil. And what did our government do in order to spur that transition? They brought in something called the Oil Depletion Allowance. And companies were given incentive to take the oil out of the ground, to bring the oil out of the ground and make that transition of energy in America. Well, somehow or other, the Oil Depletion Allowance is still around, even though oil companies are reaping huge profits and don't need the money. They don't need the Oil Depletion Allowance. But solar, companies that are doing solar work could probably make a pretty good use out of an allowance that allows them, gives them government assistance to push forward and develop the technology and transit us from oil and natural gas
Yeah.
to solar.
That subsidy is in place. Every homeowner who installs gets a 30% federal energy tax credit.
Yes.
But also states have various levels of subsidy as well.
But we fight the battle over that every day. We fight the battle with members of Congress want to cut all this stuff out.
Yeah. Well, of course, then the industry wants to eliminate it.
Yeah.
But even at no subsidies at this point, clean energy, specifically photovoltaic or electricity, solar electricity, is competitive with other forms of energy when you factor in not just the price at the pump, but the assumptions that are made. Things like the damage that producing energy in non-clean ways causes, both environmentally but also to health. So when those assumptions are factored in, it's more than even with solar is more than even with coal or oil, and now natural gas.
Because electric from solar is clean. There's no damage to the environment the way there is with oil and natural gas. And as if you take a look, I think what you're getting at is that there's environmental damage that comes. An oil refinery blows up, and there's environmental damage. There's a leak in an oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico or anywhere else. And
the train that transports oil blows up, and we've seen many derailments. We've seen acidification of the ocean. That's damage as well. And those, if you factor all that damage, moving in any way possible to generate power in a clean manner is urgent. And one of the people that most people despise is Al Gore. He had a speech in 2004 challenging all of us to be 100% clean energy in 10 years. So that would have been in 2014. And if we had the will and the urgency, we could do it.
We would have been there already.
Yeah.
We will get there. We will get there. But the question is, how much damage will be done in the interim years?
Yeah. Well, some nations think that it's urgent. Germany, for instance, one day, I think in 1 year, there were 70% clean power on one particular day.
Yeah, the vast majority of their energy comes from solar, and I think they have a little wind and a little
they do
a little wind and a little hydropower mixed in there too.
And their big goal is to phase out their 10 or is it 14 nuclear power plants.
Which have a shelf life as it is.
Yeah, and
they don't last forever.
They're talking about doing it, I believe, by 2020. So they're serious about doing clean energy. And by the way, as they're doing it, they're also generating opportunities for themselves worldwide, because now they're experts in that field. And now not only are they selling the expertise, but they're also selling the technologies that we're falling behind in.
And when American workers, and solar is beginning to employ a lot of American workers, installation, maintenance, all the phases of electrical usage from solar employs an awful lot of people. And when people do that and earn a decent living for it, earn a fair wage, what do they do with their money?
Well, they spend it, generate demand, and hence all the people that want to hoard the money generate even more money. So it's a common good thing, I guess.
So it's a matter of doing the right thing and earning a profit while you do it. Those two things are certainly not. They don't part ways. They go hand in hand. Okay, a little bit more about Joseph Stiglitz and the Great Divide. What are some of the other things he touches on?
Well, the big thing is this inequality of opportunity, and it happens in many different ways: education, income, the fact that industry wants to gain people from getting a fair wage. We see it all around us, where people with good grades, college degrees, sometimes advanced college degrees, offer $12 an hour to work in a lab. I think that's insulting to to a person who's invested all their own money, okay, and then go into debt to get that education, and then to pay off that debt on $12 an hour.
It's basically impossible, and when they defer the debt, they're just going to owe more because that there's deferred interest on that.
Yeah. I just found out I owe quite a bit of money on my children's education. I just found out, even if I pay extra, that my end date for that education is going to be 2025.
9 years.
Yeah, if I really push it. And I'm actually paying extra to get out of that.
When it comes to lower wages in America, how do HB1 visas play into that? Those are the visas where folks from other countries are allowed on a 6-month recurring basis to come work in America. They're coming from countries where their salaries are lower, so it's certainly to their benefit to come to America and earn even what amounts to a low salary compared to folks that are college educated here and living here.
Yeah, I think corporations are gaming the system. It's not just the visa where, so someone from India, for instance, comes in, has high grades, has a stellar resume, comes in here, gets paid, let's say, anywhere between 5 to 10 times more than they would earn in India. But it's cheap in this country for us to pay them because we pay them less than we would pay an American citizen. The gaming also happens in things like internships. Most internships are expected to be at no pay. So young people go for internships for the experience at no pay. So businesses are gaming them. Okay? And the inequality comes in the fact that some people cannot sustain that. Some people need to be paid.
Yeah, that's based on the presumption that an internship will lead to a good-paying job somewhere down the road.
And also, it's also based on the assumption that, in turn, you'll get rewarded with a job. My experience with my daughter's internship was that, number one, she worked like a dog at no pay, commuted to New York City at her own expense, was promised a job and a recommendation. None of it, after she prompted the owner of the company 4 times, none of it came through. She didn't expect the job, but she at least expected a letter of reference, and she got none of it. That's how businesses are gaming young people. Now, if it were someone else who couldn't afford to do that, they wouldn't get the experience. So effectively, businesses are here's another business subsidy. Business welfare, because they're taking advantage of someone who can afford to sustain that internship. All right. When I worked at General Foods and then later on Kraft and Philip Morris, we paid our interns. We paid them as if they were regular employees.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah. Actually, I managed a number of the interns, and many of them, I would say half of those interns I managed ended up being employees for our company.
And that's what you kind of anticipate going into something like that you're in a competitive situation as an intern. You have to produce, you have to perform, but a fair response at the end is if you've done well, there will be something for you at the end. There will be a job. There will be an opportunity.
Or at least a letter of reference.
Yeah, an opportunity somewhere to get a job that pays you well.
Yeah, and that's the gaming, and I think that's very subtle, but it happens to a lot of people.
So so back to the party platform. We talked about the $15 an hour wage. We have received some concessions in terms of moving towards a healthcare system that looks more like Medicare and less like HMOs, or at the very least has HMOs administering Medicare, which unfortunately I think the whole notion of HMOs is bad to begin with, because that's something that came in in the 1970s where we shifted our healthcare system from a not-for-profit, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, and things like that, of administrating healthcare and managing it, to a for-profit system with the HMOs.
Well, as far as I know, the proposal on the table was lowering Medicare age to 55.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and yeah, Bernie didn't get universal health care. Okay, but in time, I mean, it's we didn't get Obamacare on day one either. It was a move in the right direction. It wasn't 100%, but it's a move in the right direction. As is this. Unfortunately, it's going to take time to get to universal health care. But that's the nature of negotiating for the common good, and I hope the common good prevails.
That's, I think, in the best interest of everyone in the country and everyone worldwide. But we're more concerned with what's in the best interest of American citizens, because we are American citizens.
And that's also what Stiglitz argues about, that the common good, is the ultimate goal, because that's where the most people benefit. If my nation wins, then I win and everyone else wins. If a particular party wins, then everybody else loses. Nice game.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to reach the point where we're so poor in America that folks don't want to come here. They won't see an opportunity to better themselves by being here.
Well, we see that data that in terms of opportunity, among the industrial nations, according to Stiglitz, we're at the bottom, or very close to the bottom, as far as opportunity of advancing yourself. It's no longer true.
So the transition may actually begin where American citizens, where we're looking to move to Germany or France or Canada or some of the other nations in the world where things are, where opportunity is greater.
Yeah, and we already know, according to Michael Moore's movie, Where Do We Invade Next? Yeah. People are going for free tuition-free education in 22 nations, including Germany. That's
an opportunity that it certainly has some appeal, but I still think it'd be better if we could stay here in a country that we know and love and have that opportunity.
Sure.
Anything else in the book? You mentioned that the overarching thought you had about the book was it really, in fact, was it very much reflected Bernie Sanders' platform, the things he was looking for America, the things that would, not according to the slogan, the other guy's slogan, "Make America Great Again," and it would return us back to where we have things as they once were, and have a country which represents everyone, regardless, and stood up for the basic things that the constitutional things that we all believe in, not just that Second Amendment, but all the other amendments. The First Amendment being perhaps, I think, more important than the Second Amendment, and all the other amendments that go along with it in the Bill of Rights.
Yeah. Well, I think that what Stiglitz is trying to say is obviously the inequality of opportunity, but also that we're in it together. That we need to work together and help our fellow neighbor. And not everybody's going to have the same set of talents. Not everybody's going to start exactly on the at the same level base, but wherever possible, let's make it as possible for those who are in that boat to be lifted together, as opposed to everyone being in a different boat and they're rising at different rates.
As the book alludes to, stay away from that great divide where you have the uber wealthy and a very impoverished rest of everyone else, which, as we talked about, would ultimately comes back to haunt the wealthy, because they have no consumers to buy their product if they're not paying their employees a fair wage.
Yeah. So, and ultimately, they're hurting themselves. But at that level, maybe the question becomes, who cares?
Roberto, come give us some thoughts. We have Roberto Perez off camera, and he always gives us a lot of great thoughts off camera.
Talk about the professional athletes from other countries that come here and reap the millions and have no clue, really, or no interest. What about that story?
Okay. Are these professional athletes you're talking about, or college athletes, or both?
Let's say baseball.
Yeah.
There's a big influx of Cuban ball players that are being brought into the country. Where other countries, other immigrants have to go through a larger process. But if you're a talented athlete, certain doors open for you. Certain things are done more easily.
Aren't they on the HB1 visas where they get the 6 month period of time and then another 6 month extension? Isn't that how that works with athletes also?
Research that for your next show.
We certainly could, and the audience could certainly research that and give us some thoughts. And feel free to come in and join the audience. And we bring people up here occasionally out of the audience to chat a little bit because we're not the only folks in the world that have a lot of good ideas and a lot of things to talk about. We get it's an exchange of ideas with the audience, an exchange of ideas with the viewers on YouTube. KRISTIN, the number 40, Kristen 40, and on Facebook, Progressive Soup. And we get a lot of good thoughts that come our way and a lot of good suggestions. And to have people come up on stage and talk about that during the show out of the audience would be fabulous. I think it would be... We wouldn't mind being upstaged by folks from the audience one bit, would we?
Yeah. And by the way, the Bernie conversation continues every Saturday morning from 9 to 11 at Brookfield Panera. And the issues do not go away. We continue to engage people in the conversation wherever possible.
There's always a battle going on. I've seen that for the better part of my 63 years, and the battle is always going on, and there's always something to work on, and so we need to keep working. Thank you for joining us. I'm David Stevenson. Henry Pietra is my guest, and it's been Progressive Soup, and next Wednesday, 9:30. Thanks for joining us.
Done.